Good evening. So today's webinar will be about autonomous cars. Now, what is about autonomous cars that make them really good? What makes them run? What is the magic behind that is what we want to see. Now, we will go through certain things. So today for our contents, first thing I'll introduce you what is autonomous cars. Like, what is actually, fully autonomous or what is autonomous that is used in the industry today. Then we will see what all, things that are developed the technology wise from different aspects of safety and different sensor developments. Then we define what is actually an autonomous car. Then we see what is used in autonomous car in terms of sensors. And then how do autonomous cars actually see the world? Now that is a question everybody wants to know, right? Because you have all these things on your autonomous cars. So everybody wants to know how do they actually perceive the world. Then there is another aspect which is used in autonomous vehicles, but it is also done outside autonomous. It's called mapping. We'll see how it's actually used and which companies actually do it. Then we talk about some of the hardware aspects of autonomous cars because software is all good and great, but we need some kind of computational or processing units for your autonomous cars to run on. Then we'll look at what are the employment opportunities or any kind of market opportunities out there in this particular field. So without any further ado, let's go into see what is autonomous cars. So here's a small video where you can see this is a Tesla. And as everybody knows, Tesla has developed one of the kind autonomous driving to an extent. They're not necessarily a full autonomous, but they can do a lot of autonomous operations. As you can see in the video, you can detect the cars around you. You can detect the path you're going in. And then we'll see a little forward in the video where it starts to change the lanes and how it adapts to the change that is required. So you can detect the construction zone. These are the things that we need. As a driver, as a human driver, you would know all of these things, right? You would know not to hit those barricades. You would know you need to know where you're going. So your autonomous car is actually doing that. As you can see now, it starts to change lanes because it sees a barricade. And as you can see, it's not very perfect, right? It did not get that suddenly. And suddenly there is a shift that a driver has to do. This is the reason why I'm saying that this is not a full autonomous, but it can do a lot of autonomy functions out there. So let's see what the difference between a regular car and an autonomous car. Your regular car generally is more mechanical than electronics, right? Basically, your regular cars really do have probably about 80% to 70% fully mechanical compared to autonomous cars now that has actually shifted where you have almost 50% electronics in the car. You have multiple sensors for every single part of the car to know the health of the car, to actually having sensors that see the world and gather information. Now, in regular cars, you didn't have any kind of computation capability at all. If any, you had very little. So you didn't have much of computation. But when you come to autonomous cars, as I said, you need some kind of hardware, you need some kind of computation capability because now you actually have a lot of cars and a lot of sensors out there, right? Your car probably has about 80 to 90 or even 100 sensors in the car. So all these sensors need to be giving you some data and you need to be computing something about the car or something about the environment. So you have a lot of computational capability which was not seen before. Then even the software wise, you didn't have any software, or even if you did, it had very basic software, probably for an infotainment system, which has the most amount of electronics when you talk about regular cars. But when you talk about autonomous cars, you have not just the infotainment, everything else also has electronics, it has sensors, it has a lot of computation that is required. And I said no sensors, so there's a lot of sensors. The primary components, as I said, was more mechanical, some electrical, very minimal software, and very minimal electronics, right? But in autonomous cars, it is, as I said, more electronic than mechanical. And off late, there's a lot of gaming technology that is also being infused into autonomous cars because at this time, autonomous cars not just drive but also gives you a lot of experience. It's a driving experience that matters at this point at this time than just driving itself. So as I said, your autonomous cars now have more electronics than they have mechanical systems out there. So your most of the companies, your automotive companies, your OEMs are turning from purely manufacturing, because your car is now turning from pure mechanical to a lot of electronics. So it is more acting like an electronics or a software company as compared to a purely a manufacturing company or assembly unit, including your supplier. So that's the biggest change you see from an industry aspect because of this introduction of autonomous cars in your life. So the next one is, what can your autonomous cars do? As you could see there in the video itself, your cars could sense your environment outside. It could sense your barricade, it could sense another car outside, it could sense your lighting. So it has a lot of sensing technology or sensing capability, which was not available in your regular cars. Now, what made them actually make this possible? Your sensors, your cameras were available before, your radars were used before. Now, why was this not possible with your older models? It's just that these sensors were not really capable enough to withstand all these environments, because your car is driving through your sun, your rain, your snow, your wind, a lot of harsh weather conditions, right? So you sensors had to qualify, or rather had to be hardened to withstand all this environment, and now it's possible. Now it can withstand all this environment conditions. So hence usage of these sensors now became possible in cars, because of which now your car has become more sensor oriented and electronics oriented. And another important aspect, your cars now connect your network to internet, so that your car can actually have live access of some kind of data, like your traffic data, your parking data, any kind of data. You can have access to emergency services. So all of this information, where your phone was linked to all of these, now your car acts like a big phone itself, right? Your infotainment system now has not just music, it has more about what your phone acts like. So you can replicate your phone on your car. So things like these, advancements like these, have made what is autonomous cars, or made them actually possible. So I kept saying, what is autonomous cars, right? So let's classify these cars first. So we said we have the SAE. Your SAE is basically your automotive engineers. It's a group in North America and across the world, where they have now classified all your cars into different categories based on how much of capability your car has. As you can see, your regular car basically has no automation in it, meaning everything is controlled by the driver, everything is perceived by the driver, and whatever happens, your driver is the only person who can do anything. So that's your level 0, that's your regular car. Then there is some kind of assistance to your driver, right? You have your cruise control, right? Your basic cruise control is, it controls your speed. It doesn't control your steering, but it controls your speed. So that is your first ever kind of autonomy. You can see something called emergency braking you have, where if it sees a vehicle in the front of it, and you're at a certain speed where you're not able to stop, it applies the brakes. So there are a lot of other things that you have your parking assist, where you have a rear camera that shows you the lanes. Now that is an assistance, right? Because these things assist your driver, they don't really do anything in terms of action or actuation for your car. So they don't control your car. So all your controlling driver, except some kind of perception or sensing, is in the car. Then there is a little more on that. There's something called partial autonomy, or level 2, or L2 for that. Now it is something called your adaptive cruise control. So what does your adaptive cruise control do? It not only keeps your car in the same speed or maintain, it also controls you to where you're staying in. It basically makes you stay in the same lane where you've activated that feature. Same way, lane keeping assist, your lane departure warning systems. So these are some kind of partial autonomy, where there's a lot of sensing that's happening by sensors. So drivers can be little okay not sensing those things, but the control still falls back on the driver yet in this case. But you can see their level of autonomy keeps increasing. Then you have level 3, or a conditional automation. So in this, if you have feature like a stop and go cruise control, meaning if you're in a highway and you're boxed scenario in a very heavy traffic, you can basically take your hands off and then don't have to control the car. Then you can, car basically based on what is the front car that's moving, it it moves along with it, maintaining a certain distance between the cars. So this is in the Cadillac Super Cruise, is one of the features that is at L3 condition right now, or L3 levels. So this was introduced by GM, so you can look at more about what is Super Cruise. So that is some kind of autonomy where it can now start and stop a car based on your environmental conditions. So now it has gone from just sensing to having some kind of perception also, understanding the word around it. But in emergency cases, you still fall back on the driver to do a lot more stuff. Now you have high level automation. In your high level automation, you have your Waymo, your Tesla. Tesla comes between anything between L3 and L4, depending on what packages you have, but they're more towards L4 right now. So it not just senses, it also steers your car, keeps everything in place, keeps you in the lane. Or if you're joining a lane from a highway, you're joining, from your ramp, it helps you to join the lane. So it does a lot more than just sense anything that's in front of it, but senses everything around it, senses the condition, the on-road condition. So when you saw the video there, it sensed there was a construction zone, all the construction cones. So then started to actually navigate to a proper lane where it's avoiding the construction zone. So it's trying to understand. So your high level automation has some limited capability of understanding the environment around it and then acting accordingly, right? So that is little more of L4. Now full automation is basically everything is done by your car. Here you can have your hands off, your eyes off, and you can sleep in the car, and you can give it your destination, just drop you there. So you can summon your car from anywhere you want. So this is where you have full autonomous capabilities where everything is fully automated. So that is where you have this classification done, and it's important to know where your features comes into, right? Most of the current day features come anywhere between L3 and L4. That is where most of the companies, the L2 technology is very matured. There's not much going on in this field at this point in terms of L2, but L3 and L4 is where a lot of concentration and work is going on. So this is just another brief one. I said L1 is hands on, eyes on, or L2 can have some kind of hands off, but your L3 needs you can have your hands off and eyes off momentarily. Your L4 basically you can have all of it off. You can, like as in Tesla, you can talk on your phone when it's driving on its own. But in L5, basically need not sit in the driver's seat at all. There is no driver at all there. The car can drive by itself. It can do a lot of other features. So there's just a brief to know where your L3 and L4, when they talk of hands off, eyes off system, or a hands off, eyes off, and mind off system. So most of them are trying to achieve this hands off, eyes off, and mind off in all conditions. I mean, they can operate in some, but they cannot operate in all. The same being explained here now, just to, whatever I said, it has been explained here. So for L1 or L2 systems, you can, as I said, they're warning systems, meaning they're assistance systems. So you have the lane departure warning, curvature speed warning, headway warning systems that were introduced in 1990s or even early 2000. Then you have your advanced cruise control, where you have your L2/L3 systems, where it's now not just being controlling the speed, but it also controls your steering. As I said, your Tesla comes in L3 and L4. Your Waymo is already in L4, but under certain conditions. There's another important aspect of autonomous, right? When you want to be full autonomy, where you are not worried about what is going on, you can also, your car can actually take your position, or, can sense you, can sense your health status. And if any emergency, can call an emergency vehicle and pull over onto the shoulder, onto the side, and wait for the emergency vehicle. Or in some sense, you can connect your phone and you can summon your car if you're in a, let's say in a shopping mall, and your car is in a parking lot and you want the car to come to you instead of you walking to the car. You have your cars connected to you. Or if you want to see something around the car, then there is opportunities for that too. So this is where your full autonomy comes into play, where the car is fully autonomous. You just have to tell it what it needs to do, and it can do everything on its own. That's a brief introduction. Now let's see what led to all of these things. Right, the first was in terms of safety systems. Right, any system always have to deal with safety, because safety is the most important aspect in automotive. Nothing goes by if it's not safe, because safety is the most, utmost thing that everybody thinks about. Be it L3, L4, because you have humans in the car, and safety is the first and the foremost thing that they'll think of before they release any feature. So passive safety system that was there in 1990s, or in even some of the older models here, you can actually see that, the first systems ever developed was your seat belts. Because when you take up 1980s or 70s, when initially the cars came in, you didn't have any seat belts. So if you were to be, hitting another car, you would be flying out of your seat. So you had seat belts that were introduced during that time to help restrain yourself from, when you had a collision, that you go and hit yourself on the windshield. Then come the airbags. So even if you did move, your airbags got deployed where you have a cushion kind of a thing that avoids your head being smashed against any kind of a dashboard. So those are the two main, say, passive safeties, or the largest passive safety systems that was introduced way earlier, but still being used, because these are something mandatory in any car for it to be sold as a car. Because now we take it for granted, but back in 1980s, you had an option not to have a seatbelt. So now you don't think of it as a system altogether, but because your seat belts also are now advanced, right? They're advanced in a sense that they have pre-tensioners in them, where at the moment of collision or an imminent collision, it tightens your seat belt so that you are not in a position to move forward at all. Otherwise, your seat belt, which is basically elastic, right? You can feel it, you can actually move it. So if you didn't have a pre-tensioner, you would be moving. So there are some passive safety systems that are upgraded, but there's not enough, there's not much more to do as to, into these systems. The other type of systems is occupancy. Now you can lock a car and go away, but not realize that there is some kind of a, if you have a child in the back seat, or if you have a pet in the back seat, that the back seat is occupied. And then you can go away, and then it can end up in a very big disaster. So you have this occupancy sensing where all of these passive systems kick in if there is an occupation of a seat. So your seat belt tensioner on your passenger side may or may not activate based on if your your seat is occupied. So if it is not occupied, your pre-tensioner will not come into play, and so your seat belts are, not modified. But on the driver side, it will be. So in this sense, your passive safety basically was invented to reduce the effects of accidents and not necessarily to avoid it. So let's see where this, as I said, your pre-tension seat belts, your airbags. Even in a mechanical form, your car had something called deformation zones or crumple zones, where if you hit them, it gets crumpled and the impact is in the crumple zone and is not transmitted to the driver, at least not the full force. So there are some mechanical systems that help you avoid damage after an accident, but nothing of these sense actually helps you avoid an accident. All of this comes into play after it has occurred. So that is where people are thinking, how do we actively avoid an accident? So that is where active safety comes in. Because active safety basically is you're proactively looking for an impact or an imminent collision or some sort of trouble, so these systems can kick in and avoid it well before it happens. Right, your airbags will deploy not before an accident occurs. Actually, it deploys at the moment of accident. Basically, it takes into your deceleration. Your excessive deceleration actually triggers one signal for your airbag to deploy, but it doesn't avoid an accident. So to avoid it, you have sensors now, because as I said, sensors developed, in terms of robustness, in terms of safety, in terms of quality wise, it can qualify for automotive standards, because automotive standards are pretty high and pretty intense in terms of having to be used in a car because it deals with lives. So these sensors now were hardened for all the environment, qualified to the automotive processes. So now they got into the use in the cars. So they are able to now proactively know if there is a car or you're going to have an imminent collision. So that is the reason why it's called active safety, because they're actively looking at situations that can lead to a collision. So they have to prevent it, not necessarily reduce the impact. It is to prevent an accident altogether. So that is where active safety is actually much more, let's say, better in terms of keeping you safe. So this is an example illustration of what an active safety is. You see there are sensors, there are compute units now, because you have sensors now, you have to compute, you have data. So as soon as your data, you need some computation capability. So you have that capability in you in the car. Then you have sensors that senses the car in front, senses the environment around the car. That way it can know that if there is somebody coming in the crossroad and heading towards the vehicle, then it knows that it has to avoid the person or at least indicate to the driver there's an imminent collision that can happen. So this is where active safety actually plays a lot of role. And all of your other development that has happened is all under active safety, including your autonomous driving, come under active safety in a bigger umbrella, in terms of safety systems. So let's look at some of these active safety systems that are first developed. First was the anti-lock brakes, right? Meaning or ABS. This is basically when you are driving at high speeds and suddenly apply brakes, right? You're applying brakes all of a sudden. What happens is your brake or your tires start to slide. Why is this? Because your sudden deceleration and your is there a slippage of wheels on the surface on the road, so hence your wheels start to slide. But what does this anti-lock does is as soon as it senses the sliding, what it does is it stops applying the brake and waits for the wheels to come into a state where it can then apply the brakes evenly on all the four wheels. So it has a sensing of slippage or a slipping sensor, which is basically a Hall effect based sensor or magnetic based sensor. So this was the first type of active safety where you're trying to prevent any accident that happens because your cars have started to slide. The next type of system, which is the stability control system, right? Here, when you're driving on a curve or in a mountain region and you hit a corner with a high speed, suddenly what happens is you do not know when to apply brakes, or you don't even know if there's a corner coming in that sharply. So your car can then suddenly sense that your car, you're heading into a curve because there's a lot of change in your yaw rate of the car because you're turning steeply and you're turning at a high speeds. So what it does is it basically tells the system to apply brakes, but not all of a sudden and full. Gradually apply brakes so as to able to steer the car. Its role is not to stop the car, but its role is to steer the car in the right direction, right? And they take inputs from your yaw rate sensor, your steering wheel angles, so that it actually knows at what angle you are in. So if you turn too much, then you oversteer. If you turn too less, you understeer. So it needs to know where exactly your steering wheel is when it's turned. And you are it because your car is moving in a certain direction that is not lateral or longitudinal. So you have your yaw rate sensor helping you to do that. So as you can see, there are more and more sensors now that are coming into play that is helping you to prevent an accident. So the next one is, as I said, emergency braking or autonomous emergency braking. So these are basically when you're driving pretty fast or you're driving in a straight road or somewhere where suddenly you don't see the car because you're distracted and there's a car in front of you which you realize pretty late for the speed you're in. So even if you apply, you would go and hit. So this is where your emergency braking comes into play, where it can start to detect cars. Now this uses radar, it can use cameras, it can use any number of sensors to detect that car outside, which is in front of it, get the speed of your own car and calculate, is there an imminent collision? Are you slowing down enough or not? And if you're not, it starts to apply brakes on its own without telling you. So hence, this emergency braking does avoid a lot of front-end collisions. So the next system is a lane departure warning system. So this was introduced primarily many times in trucks and then came into cars, because this is where when you're driving on a highway for longer times and you're feeling drowsy, you start to deviate from the lane. So what happens when you start to deviate is that you basically, you can come into path of another car, and that can lead to a very bad accident. So that is where your lane departure warning system warns you, saying that, okay, you are going off the lane. Now this works if you have good road infrastructure where your lanes are painted and they are nice and they're up, kept up. But otherwise, sometimes if you do not have lanes, this system doesn't really work. Doesn't help you much because it doesn't know where the lane is. So that is where your lane departure warning systems are only driver assistance. They are not necessarily driver helping. They're not helping you keep the car in place. So the next system, which is a lane keep assist, actually helps to do that. It not only detects that you are moving away from the lane or weavering away, it actually keeps your car in place. It basically gets the car back into the lane and then keeps the car steadily at the center of the lane, so that even if you doze off in between, your lane keep assist keeps the car in the same lane. So this is another thing that actually helps you avoid a lot of accidents, especially if you're doing a lot of highway driving. Now this driver monitoring system, the DMS, is actually to check on the driver, because now they found a lot of accidents are happening because the drivers are either distracted or tired or drowsy, or probably they're drowsy because they're medicated. So a lot of issues that made the drivers either feel sleepy. So then you want to see whether your drivers are actually sleeping or was it something else. So that is where your driver monitoring system actually checks you for if you're drowsy, you're sleeping, or distracted, and beeps at you to get your attention back on the road. Because whatever it is, you still do not have a full autonomy. You can still have rogue vehicles coming in front of you without even you realizing it. So hence your driver monitor system keeps you up, keeps you awake, it keeps your attention on the road. Then there is the intelligent speed assistance, where they use GPS to keep track of how fast a vehicle is moving and where you are. So knowing where you are and getting the data from a government, let's say map, where they know this section of the highway you are supposed to drive at, let's say 60 miles an hour, but your vehicle's moving at 75 to 80 miles an hour. Then your speed assistance can kick in and say, now you have to slow down your car, and slows down the car by applying brakes or putting your pedal off the gas. So you can actually slow down and attain the speed that you're supposed to drive in. So GPS is another important sensor that is also used in many of your autonomous operations or autonomous functions. So you can see active safety includes a lot of electronics. Most of it is electronics, if not all. They use a very wide variety of sensors. So if your car has lane keep assist, lane departure warning, it has automatic braking, it has speed assistance. So then it uses a lot of sensors in it, right? For each of these features, there's one or two sensors that are associated with these features. So you then start to have some sort of autonomy starting to build up in the car. But because of this, because these sensors, now you have computational capabilities that are required by the car, right? Your car now has to deal with like 8 to 10 to 12 to 50 sensors. So it has to have the capability to process all those signals from 50 sensors. And these signals can vary in terms of where, size. It can be very heavy signal where you have things from camera coming in, or you have very light data coming in from GPS because it's only giving you coordinates. So yeah, so it's basically you have a computation unit now starting to be introduced into these cars. So now you have the problem of, do we want to do certain type of computation or not? So there's the question of, do we do the computations independently at the sensor area and then get only the processed output into the compute area or the central area, or do we get all the data into the central compute area and then compute it all it in the same place? So each has its own pros and cons, but these are the two things mainly that you have to think about. You have to know how to do this, depending on what features you are and how the car is laid out in terms of sensors and the compute. So can you do central compute units, or do you have to do distributed units? So this is where when you started to use a lot of central compute units, you had to develop a lot of power efficient processing units or microcontrollers so that you can do a lot more data or process a lot more data in that pretty short time, but also consume low power, because your car is limited on providing power, because it needs power to run, it needs power to power on the sensors, then it also needs power to run these computer units. So if you have a supercomputer inside, you probably would not have able to do much, because it doesn't have enough power to provide the supercomputer along with everything else that it needs to power. So then it led to something called smart sensors, because when you have a distributed computing and you want to do computing or computations at the sensor area, you probably had some kind of compute units attached to sensor itself. So sensor never gave out raw materials or raw data. It gave out processed data always. So you never had access to a raw data from the sensor. So there are, and as I said, with more and more sensors, you had more and more questions on how to do things.